So first, just some logistics. Welcome. There are going to be opportunities for us to interact with each other. If at any point you have a question, feel free to put it into the chat by clicking on that little box that looks like a speaker bubble. You could also raise your hand or unmute your mic and speak. And Emily, like she said, she's going to be monitoring in the chat. So any questions that come up, she will bring up or answer them if she's able to do that just right then. So who am I and why am I here? My name is Lindsay Oslin. I am a K-3 collaborative teacher here in Tacoma. I have been teaching in Tacoma for about 10 years. I started as a substitute teacher all over in K-5 classrooms, and I taught kindergarten for several years at Bernie Elementary. And then this is my third year. I have to say a dream job. I am a kindergarten through 3 collaborative teacher, and that means I get to go into teachers' classrooms and share their space and share their students and focusing on literacy. I also am a mom. I have 2 sons, one of whom is a first grade student here in Tacoma. So I have some background knowledge academically, but also I know what it's really like to be at home with students who are developing their reading skills. So what is a read aloud? This is a picture of one of my collaborative teachers, Miss Suspan at Bernie, and she's demonstrating what is a classic read aloud. Students are pulled in tight. There is one text. The purpose is to share an experience, to share the love of learning. And we do that through the teacher reading, the students listening and thinking. And the purpose of a read aloud is really to develop a love of reading, but also to encourage students to do some deep critical thinking about the text. And we're going to talk more about how to get students to do more of that thinking lift throughout this presentation. So now we know what a traditional read aloud looks like in the classroom, but what does that look like at home? Well, really, I see it as a flip, a reverse, because in the classroom, what we're trying to recreate in a read aloud is what we hope students are getting at home, which is where they're pulled close, there's one book, and they're sharing that experience. They're talking about what they're seeing, they're talking about what they're thinking. And so, as I said, as teachers, we are trying to recreate the experience that we hope that students are having at home. We're going to talk more about how you can have a really meaningful time with your students, pulled close to you, sharing a text that you all love. So just to get started interacting with each other in the chat, which again is clicking that speech bubble, I would like you to answer one or both of the following, whatever you're comfortable with. Is first of all, what questions do you have about reading with your student? Or what memories do you have as reading as a child? So go ahead and just take some think time and then drop in what you're thinking into the chat. Emily, is there anything that you'd like to bring out so far?
We have some great things in the chat of what suggestions do you have for special needs students, ADHD or ODD. We have a comment of, I remember reading The Very Hungry Caterpillar. As a parent of a first grade student, we have a parent who's wondering about how to help a kiddo stick with it when he's feeling discouraged or overwhelmed. And a memory of, I learned to read when I was 3. I remember reading Cinderella to the class in kindergarten and helping others to read. Personally, I remember, I think I shared this with Lindsay as well. My dad was on a Navy ship and he recorded himself on cassette tape and sent me the cassette tape in the book. And I still have those to this day. So I have fond memories of reading, but we have some wonderful things in the chat. And let's see, we have from Tammy, I loved read alouds and Little House on the Prairie. And a question of how do you entice kiddos to want to sit down and read with a parent? So we've got some really great questions in the chat as well.
I would say with my own children, it starts with finding something that you're all interested in. And I struggle, I'll tell a parent story here, is that my 4-year-old is really into the Lego sets. They come with those directions that tell you how to put everything together. He calls it the menu. And he will sit down and read it, like talk about, and he'll point 1, 2, 3, number the steps. And as a parent, I would love him to get into something that's maybe a little more, I don't know, rich or meaningful to me. But really, that is instilling a love of reading for him. And so it's important for me to recognize where he is at with reading right now, and just try every once in a while, low pressure, to introduce something else, even just for short periods of time. In the classroom, when we are starting read alouds, especially for our youngest readers, we really only start with a couple minutes, like 2 minutes at a time for a read aloud to hold their stamina. So wherever you and your child or your student are at is absolutely okay. And give the grace and the permission to start with where you are and just build on maybe 1 extra minute every day. So why reading? And this chart, whenever you see it, depending on our delay, says why read 20 minutes at home? And it's important because it builds language acquisition, which is vocabulary, and it adds to their experiences. And again, it creates a shared experience that when they are in school, they can think about their times reading together at home and make some really important connections, and building on that you, as their first teachers, have started the foundation on in the classroom. The essential questions for our session today are: how can I make the most of the reading we do at home? And what are some ways I can support my child's reading development at home? And our learning objectives, what I hope that we all walk away from, is learning about the importance of sharing the joy of reading with your student, learn specific ways to support reading development through reading aloud, talking, and asking questions about books. And then we will have time, hopefully at the end, for some Q&A, some questions, and I will do my very best to answer any questions that you have. Just pausing a moment to see if my PowerPoint catches up. And one thing if you walk away with nothing else, is to remember that as a parent and caregiver, you get to do the fun part. And that's a quote that I borrowed from Lisa Hensler, who works with us here in Tacoma, is that as teachers, we focus on what we call the nitty gritty, the getting students to be able to decode or get the print off the page. And with a read aloud, the focus is really, again, on that experience and on the critical thinking and asking questions about the text. So I have a video here, and I really hope this works for us. And it's an example of family reading time. And while you are watching this, just see what you notice about the questions and the conversation. And Emily, if it's not working, let me know. And I don't know what I'll do, but we'll figure it out.
No, I'm right here. Everything it's going to be great. You're doing great.
And now it's family reading time. Did you know that asking your child questions while reading can help him become a stronger reader?
Why do you think he's calling for his mama?
Because he wants a drink.
You think? Llama?
Oh, because he's lonely.
Asking open-ended questions, or questions that don't have simple yes or no answers, gives your child the chance to use a lot of language and helps her understand what's happening in the book.
What do you notice about his face?
Is he happy?
What do you think?
He's sad.
How do you know he's sad?
Oh,
Look here. What's that?
a tear.
A tear. Is he crying?
Yeah.
Research shows that having conversations during book reading can strengthen children's language and early literacy skills. Family reading time tip. Ask your child open-ended questions when reading.
Family Reading Time has been brought to you by the...
So with these open-ended questions, like they brought up, they're not questions that have simple yes or no answers. They start often with what do you think or why do you think? And there's three purposes for asking questions. The first is to invite the student to make a prediction about what they think is going to happen or what the book is going to be about. And I'm going to give you specific examples of questions that you can ask that serve each of these purposes. Another purpose is to make connections. This allows the student to do some thinking about the text or the book and make connections either between themselves and the book and another book. And then I included informational or nonfiction text separately just because there are other types of questions that can be specific to informational text, but informational text questions could also be about making predictions or connections. So when we're inviting a student to make a prediction about a text, some questions we might ask are, what do you see on the front cover? What do you think this book will be about? And what do you think will happen next? And don't worry about writing these down because I have a document that I will send to you that is a PDF of a beautiful reading map that one of our Tacoma Public Libraries created for Tacoma Public Schools with all of these questions. So we're going to practice together making a prediction. So think about the questions. What do you see on the front cover? What do you think this book will be about? And what do you think will happen next? And look at this book. This is the front cover of the book, The Bee Tree by Patricia Polacco. Now, what do you see on the front cover? What do you think this book will be about? And what do you think will happen next? If you would like, you could go ahead and drop what you're thinking into the chat.
And Lindsay, for those who are thinking about what they're typing, can you repeat the three questions that you just asked?
What do you see on the front cover? What do you think this book will be about? And what do you think will happen next?
And if somebody is unable to type in the chat, is it permissible for them to raise their hand and maybe come on mic if they wanted to ask something or respond out loud? Okay.
I love it.
So we've got one in the chat. Hannah says, I think the man is going to try to catch a bee, but he might get stung. Thank you, Hannah. It looks like a few others are formulating their ideas and typing in the chat right now.
I like as you were saying that Hannah was saying that, I started making all these connections about the time I got stung by a bee, and I got really excited about the book.
Russell also typed in the chat, I see two people who might be beekeepers and they have harvest honey. And we have another comment in the chat as the little girl may be afraid to be stung because she has the hood covering her head. I hadn't noticed that detail.
Nor had I. And what an amazing opportunity to then have a conversation about how when we're afraid, we kind of cover up and what we do. For the sake of time, I am going to move on to the next purpose, which is making connections. And this is where we think about, what does the story, the character, the event remind you of? How do you feel about what is happening? It's funny how some of these started coming up when we were making our predictions. And tell me about your favorite part. And what was funny, scary, sad, or interesting for you? And again, don't worry about writing these down. We are going to try this together with another form of text. And I did create another slide, and this will come back up. So just think about, what does this make you think of? What does it remind you of? How do you feel? What is funny, scary, sad, or interesting for you? I'm going to try another video. This is the story Joy and Heron by, in 2018 by Passion Pictures. Now, what did this story, the characters, or the events remind you of? How did you feel about what was happening? Tell me about your favorite part and what was funny, scary, sad, or interesting for you. You can type it into the chat, or if you're comfortable, you can come on mic and tell us what you're thinking.
And it looks like a few people are thinking about what they're typing. I can see those little dots moving as people are typing their responses. There was a lot that happened in that wonderful 3 minutes. Thank you for sharing that resource.
And it's a good way just for families to see that we could also do this with short films or something that students are watching on TV or cartoons or anything like that.
So in the chat, Hannah posted, I appreciate these questions. I'm excited to use them with my son when we read together this evening. Thank you, Hannah. And that's the great thing also about this recorded webinar is that you'll be able to come back and see these questions again later on. Another comment was the music was a character in the film. Loved that.
Oh my. I have watched that several times and I've never even thought of that.
What a great connection.
Yes. As you continue to think about the connections that you had with that piece of text, because a film is a piece of text, We can think about our informational text, which is nonfiction text, and some questions that we can ask regarding our informational text. We could also ask, what do you think this book is about, by looking at the front cover, those predictive or connecting questions. But we could also ask specifically, what are the charts, pictures, labels, etc. telling you? What does the author want you to know? What have you learned so far? And what is something interesting you learned and now want to share with a friend or family member? And we're going to practice this on one last piece of informational text together. And it's this chart that we looked at the beginning. So what do the labels and pictures tell you? What do you think the author wants to know? What have you learned so far? Or what are you excited to share that was interesting?
And I posted a picture of those questions from the previous slide in the chat as well, in case people wanted to reference those questions also.
Wonderful, thank you.
It looks like we've got a few people typing in the chat. And if anyone wants to come on mic, you're welcome to raise your hand and let us know if you want to answer anything on mic. We have a couple of comments in the chat. This is helpful. We've been working on talking about text features, charts, pictures, labels with nonfiction texts. It's good to know we're headed down the right road. And Tammy commented the author wants us to see the important impact of reading every day for 20 minutes. And Robert and Nancy says, we love that screen. The power of one more book, one more day practicing reading makes a huge difference. Great comments. Thank you, everyone.
Yes. And also thinking about the stick with itness, right? Just one more minute, just one more book every day. So let's check back in with our objectives. What I hope that we learned together was learning about the importance of sharing the joy of reading with your student, learning specific ways to support reading development through reading aloud, talking, and asking questions about books. And any questions that you have, what questions do you have, and what are your next steps? You could put them in the chat, you could come off mic, or you're always welcome to email me. My email is there. And we do have an exit survey for you there. And I know I didn't answer our questions about our special needs students, students with ADD or ADHD. I think that would be a wonderful follow-up for another webinar.
So I've tossed a few things into the chat, but for those of you who do have a smartphone with you, if you wanted to use the camera on your phone and scan that QR code that's on the screen, you can certainly do that, or the same link I put in the chat, so you're able to answer that way as well. Lindsay, I want to thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your talent, your time with us this evening. It's been a wonderful session. We're grateful for your time with us. We know that you've got these full days and you're so knowledgeable in your content, in your craft. So thank you. And thank you for everyone who was able to participate in the chat and be here with us this evening.